So we'll wait. No, I think we have a Chrome. Let's just make sure that I check in the chat. Alexi, you're good with the chat checking in case there's a question coming up. Feel free to ping me on Slack. I'll be able to see it there. Okay. And perfect. And Alexi, do you see my Community Core AMA presentation? I don't see it myself, so I just want to make sure that it's free. Okay, awesome. Hello guys, thank you for coming. Super happy to have a small group here. So yeah, this is the first one of 2026. I know there've been a lot of changes, and it's long due. So the way we'll structure this call is we'll explain a bit the evolution. So I think we owe you this. We owe you technically what happened since 2020, like 2018, high level. And feel free to ask any question in the chat if you need clarification. So we'll go through the evolution of strategy, share a few things in numbers at 2025, also give you visibility on all the changes that happened for the last year. And as well, I'll share verbally a strategy outline for 2026. The goal is we don't want to be held accountable. You'll just feel free to listen really carefully. The goal is listening, and we'll make sure that so I'll share what we do in 2026, also share a bit of the problem we're solving. And then we have not excluded a single question. We just rephrase them in just categories, and we'll go through them all. If you have any questions that arise, please ask them in the group, and Alex, you will share it with me. Awesome. So let's start by the evolution. You might have noticed, but I think there's a lot of things that happen in Request Network since the ICO time, and we've tried many different things, and so I just wanted to give back another detail on that. So technically in 2017, that's where the ICO was made on the white paper, and all the SDK development was bootstrapped and actually done. It took Etienne, the team, Chris, like around almost 2 years to complete it, to have actually a fully functioning product, and trying to have, yes, it's recorded, and trying to have technically adoption on the protocol. So ICO, the job was done, and technically by end of 2018, the work was entirely completed. And most of the work that you're still using today, that we're still using today, was entirely done. Chris continued, and the team was continuing to try to onboard new builders. But what we figured is a lot of the builders were not onboarding, or at least too young, or there was not enough, I would say, project that would actually use the protocol. They were either not ready, or the understanding that Chris, Etienne, Johan, Vincent had on the protocol was higher. And they actually knew what was needed, but they're struggling to create that. So that's actually where Chris and Johan, so Johan is a long-term friend of Chris, that was actually not in the Request Network story at the beginning, but actually was brought in to actually create Request Finance. So it's an entirely new company. They raised money separately, and they actually wanted to prove that the protocol was usable and actually was great. And they actually did an amazing job with that. They actually became one of the most successful payment company in crypto, especially serving crypto native, but they were the first customer of the protocol, integrating on the SDK level, and actually helped us as well, the protocol, evolve over time. So that's also how they became such a big player in our ecosystem, because they're the first one. They knew also really well the protocol, but as well they were before everyone. And so that's technically how Request Finance was born. So I've heard about the story about Chris leaving, but in the end, when you actually follow exactly the decentralized protocol approach, it runs for you. It's on chain. The code is there, the code was built, and you make sure that it can be maintained, but actually you don't need a team to run it. And that was the initial approach that Chris had, which is we built it, it's ready to be used, and Request Finance is the proof that the protocol existed and worked. And so they did their part, and they were waiting for other builders to integrate. And that's where I think between the 2020s and 24, the focus was really on the decentralized protocol. That's where Omar, then Umar, and that's also where Francisco came in, where the goal was, okay, let's continue improving, and also David was there. And that's where actually we solidified the protocol. We made sure that it could be used, but we're still hoping for the full decentralized approach where people would understand the SDK, integrate it themselves, and build a project out of it. We figured that it was actually very dependent to grants. So we had actually very often, we had grant phishing project that was trying to just onboard. As soon as they actually got the grant, they would actually go. Because the investment it required to integrate the SDK was actually huge. And I think the big learning we've made over the last year and a half, which is if you ask a startup to invest early in its SDK, or at least having Solidity engineer, blockchain engineers, and just build something even before having a market fit, it's actually too much to ask too early. And I think that's where in 2025, Francisco led a really deep pivot to an API. We just figured out, okay, Request Finance is succeeding. They're making really good traction, good volume, and they're a leader on the market. We want to help others to do the same. And so we thought that Request Finance was the leader, and then the rest would follow. And that's how Francisco, David, and the team really rebuilt and centralized a bit through an API to make it easy to use, to make sure that all the skills that we've built internally on the API, like on the SDK, were not lost at just building very complex SDK, but actually used to actually make easy API integration. And overall, we had success. We had integration, I'll go a bit through it afterwards. We had integrations, but I think the end of 2025, we just covered as well something about the market. But overall, 17 ICO, start of the SDK development, completed by end of 2018, early 19. For a full year, they try to onboard customers without grants, or trying to find a way to have healthy growth. They struggle. They want to lead by example, create Request Finance, raise their money on the side, bring in Johan, and actually created one of the most successful crypto-native company. The protocol then was a bit self-sustaining, and that's where Francisco rebuilt it. Umar first, and then after that Francisco rebuilt it, and David was there as well, and then we built up the technological internal abilities. That's where we moved to an API, and that's where 2025 was, and I think we had an amazing year in terms of technology. In terms of adoption, I'll go through it a bit later. It was not at our expectation, but overall, that's the approach we've taken. Any question before I move on? I'll take it as a no. So, few things on 2025. Overall, even though it spiked by the end, if you could see the volume, is we actually spiked by roughly 50%. So it's not as much as we wanted, but it's 50% increase. It's mainly in volume, because as you can see, we had a huge consolidation in number. I think there've been a lot of questions on the dashboards. As what we're seeing is exactly after Bybit's hack. So Bybit's hack, I don't know if you're familiar, but I'll go very quickly. Multisig safe frontend was hacked, and because of that, they were able to spoof the front end and actually lure the payers, the multisig owners, to sign a transaction to a malicious smart contract. And after exactly that, so it technically was multisig, it was safe front end that was hacked, even though it's Bybit that reviewed. The only thing they didn't see is that they were paying for the first time the smart contract. So it means that there's a huge scrutiny that we observed, and potentially a feeling of insecurity whenever someone pays a smart contract, because you need to know which smart contract you're paying to, because you actually put more than just the amount of your payment at risk. You put the content of your wallet. So overall, we increased. We had actually Curate project integrating with Cryptoverse, Crypto, Zero Finance, WTF. That ranges from bill payment, P2P payments, from invoicing, the same like Cryptos does the exact same thing as Request Finance does, or WTF, which is a messaging app that actually allow you to send each other money through our protocol. So it's actually a very broad range of usage. And this is not the only ones, these are just notable ones that are in the community. But so far, people try to do everything. We have, from B2B invoicing to P2P payment links to actually just checkout experiences. And how did we compare it overall to the stablecoin market? The stablecoin market in supply increased by only 40% over the same period. However, I'm not saying that we should just follow the market. We should have an edge, and we believe deeply that we're way ahead and we have a better technology. So technically, this is our baseline. So technically, we just increased 10% compared to the baseline, which is not what we're hoping for. Additionally, if you use the stablecoin active address value chain, so the number of unique address moving, we're actually seeing that it's 70% increase of activity. So amount is a bit different because we're looking at amount, how much was processed, or activity-wise, it's 70%. So why we believe that we were not able to get an edge, like the edge we wanted over the market is, I think what we've discovered in 2025 is that we relied very heavily on the crypto native payment market, which is technically Request Finance. Request Finance handled for more than 95% of our volume. It's actually massive. And we actually made it easy for people to copy or to process payment the same way as Request Finance. And we thought Request Finance was a market leader in a growing market. What we figured in 2025 is actually they were actually a monopoly. We see that they already had most foundations. They were kind of racing cost, prices to the bottom. And most foundations use us, use Request Finance, which use us. And actually, we're seeing that the foundation's money is drying out. And so is the growth potential. And when we had newer integration, even though they integrated, they're processing quite a good amount of requests of invoices, but we actually are not seeing the transaction volume we expect. And actually, what our assumption is, it's actually given this market situation. And so in 2026, we do not want to be at risk of a market. We want to go where the market is buoyant, and we want to go where the market grows. But overall, that's the big learning from 2025 is Request Finance was a great success. We made it easy to copy Request Finance. We actually made it better. We did cross-chain, we did subscription. Anything you can do, we just created an easier way to exactly replicate what Request Finance does. However, the market didn't grow with it and wasn't ready for that. We also in 2025 consolidated the team. You might have seen there's a lot of changes, new faces as well. So that's the cruise speed team. So we still have Rodrigo, David, Eamon, and Kerry on the engineering side. We brought in Quentin. So Quentin was based in Singapore, is actually very knowledgeable. He was head of sales for one of the biggest growing startups in Singapore and corporate security, knows really well anything that has to do with legal licensing and overall bigger company setup. Alexis, that was a head of marketing in a fintech in Europe, one of the main ones. Kai, that is our fractional CMO, is there at 40% of the time, and he's helping guide the overall direction. He's coming, so he's someone that I've met at Uber and Grab. That is someone that led, I think, one of the most successful teams I've seen there. So we have today a bigger team, not a bigger team. We have the same amount of people, but we have a team that is a bit more focused about iterative growth and startup rather than what we were before, which is a foundation that tried to set standard, try to hope to activate a community of builders. What we've seen is a builder without incentive, for them, it's really difficult to integrate. And we're seeing a few projects coming in since we have an API, which is way easier, but the same kind of project with the SDK would have been impossible. Something that you will see is, you see that Francisco is not on this picture anymore. Francisco's last day is next week. So he's leaving Request Network, yes, next week. So it's a big change. So I'm taking over the product function for the time being. And the goal is to really reconnect what Request Network does with its market, with the customer need, and trying to move away of the Web3 building without an audience that we could observe in the Web3 market. 2026 strategy. So I think that's what's important part for you guys. So I'll go through it very, very briefly, and please interrupt me if you have any questions. But technically, the ambition remained the exact same, as we want people to be able to document on-chain transaction, make on-chain transaction pay each other, and at one point, as soon as the volume is met, we want to be able to activate all the network features that were part of the part of the white paper. So we want to be able to have the network of users, the factoring, and anything that actually comes from a network. But this has no understanding. However, realistically, we cannot start on the network. We figured out that actually persisting a request first was too much to ask to a Web3 community that is by design not holding the correct accounting records. And so if you actually ask them to create invoices before even paying them, you actually create a bottleneck that you actually can never resolve. So over the years, we underestimated several constraints. We underestimated that people don't need to document before paying. We underestimated that blockchain resources and Solidity engineers are rare and expensive. And if you ask for a small project to build a decentralized infrastructure with expensive engineers before even having a business need or even a market fit is impossible. So regardless of how we can incentivize, we will never be able to build a network if we start by having the documentation, the invoicing, and hope to grow from there. As an example, I'll share it later, the numbers, but technically, the market of invoicing is extremely small, the market for payment is huge. So that's why we're pivoted to payment. We actually want every single payment to go through Request Network, and if we need to invoice, if we need to document or persist after the fact, we will. But if we start to have an invoice, because every invoice needs a payment, but not every payment needs an invoice. And by actually restricting ourselves to the request, the persistence of request that used to cost 10 cents, we're actually reducing our market to people that actually needed an invoice, but not people that just needed to remit funds. We also discovered that our positioning, like a request, an invoice, is a regulatory requirement. And the Web3 market doesn't care today about regulation. It's a distant. The only way people are now caring about regulation is it prevent them to put on certain yield, DeFi, or taxes. But preventive documentation for after the fact regulatory protection is something that did not drive adoption. So technically, now, rather than building the network, like trying to build the idealistic network of invoice and grow, we shifting entirely. What we want is to process a tremendous amount of payment. Last year, we were focusing in on growing an equivalent of request finance market with all this crypto that needed to be remitted. However, this is a finite market, and that's not the one we want. So what we want to tap into the decentralized payment market, and we want every person that owns a decentralized wallet to be able to pay a merchant that owns a decentralized wallet. Today, this link between a consumer and a merchant does not exist. A consumer has his wallet that is used as a cold wallet that usually moves in an exchange or moves in an exchange wallet, like Coinbase wallet, Kraken wallet, which is actually already centralized. They don't own their keys. They could own the keys, but actually that's what then going through Stripes into the gateways that are then transmitted to fiat. They could do it because the exchanges already have the identity, already have everything, like the licenses that they need to be a fintech. What we want to tap is we want to allow any consumer to pay any merchant, and any merchant becomes then a payer to pay anyone. And we want this to be unlocked. And so for now, what we want to, so the strategy for 2026 is we want to make crypto payment usable, safe, and reliable. Today, they're not usable. It's hard to understand, it's hard to pay, it's hard to integrate with the request like network, even though we're discovering that you need to know how to submit a transaction to the blockchain. You need to already know a lot of things in order to accept or send payments. Second, it's not safe. We saw it with Bybit hack. If you pay a smart contract, you need to know where you're paying the smart contract, and you need to control and protect your front end very aggressively. If someone gets the keys of your front end, it can very easily reroute the call data to a malicious smart contract and potentially put your consumers at risk. So we want this to be usable, we want this to be safe, and we want this also to be reliable. Today, payment transactions go through or not, they don't fail. You need to know whether consumers, on which chain your consumers is, or on which chain it's going, on which you need to collect, either you use the same chain. You have a lot of complexity you need to manage. So technically, the plan for this year is we make it super cheap, easy and safe to pay and accept crypto using one-shot payment. So that means that we're way geared toward acceptance and disbursement, rather than just what we were initially, which is an invoice, which is way more B2B. That second, so we go for markets that actually need today stablecoins, then we actually learn and mature offering from these markets that we call underserved. Underserved are anyone that are currently using crypto. Certain game sectors, and there's certain even localization like Latin America that are using crypto as of necessity. We want to make sure that we're there to give them the option to pay decentrally without going through any central fintech. As soon as we are serving the underserved, and we learn from this in 2026, that's where we want to unlock the more complex fiat equivalents. So we start by security, that's critical, and usability. But then, for example, crypto does not solve certain key elements like fungibility. So when you actually receive a euro from a European bank, you can actually expense it straight away or spend it straight away in a shop. Nobody knows where this euro comes from. However, when you're using a crypto, like a stablecoin, you actually can track in percentage how much of this data, how much of this money comes from where. And it creates another problem. We've tried to convince big marketplaces to accept our crypto and to accept the protocol, and they always have the same thing, is how do I make sure that I can redeem this crypto for fiat? And for that, you actually need to front load a lot of the checks. You need to be able to refuse the payments, you need to be able to know where it's coming from, you need to be able to document if it's a sale of goods that have been made. So overall, that's our plan. This year, we make it extremely easy and usable and reliable and cheap to accept crypto. As soon as we gain traction on the underserved market, as soon as we gain traction on this, and in parallel, we start solving what the fiat markets need in order to adopt crypto, which is the KYT, the de facto fiat transaction, transition, and the ability to. There's also another part, like for example, having several users on the wallet. Today, when you actually are on decentralized payment, you can only have one key per EOA. And you actually ended up having a problem where if you have a company of more than 1%, you either need to have a multi-sig, so it means they need two signers, so the CEO needs to be part of everything. But you cannot have a real proper segregation of rule to actually make a EOA serve as a company wallet or bank account. So that's why now this year we focus on making it easy for underserved, and we solve one by one all the problems for the real companies to use crypto. And as soon as we learn, we actually then turn on the network effect. So network effect that is around factoring, that is around triple entry accounting, that is very dear to PG, which is important. But in order for triple entry accounting to work, you need the two companies to use request. You need the two companies to use request meaningfully in a big amount, and making sure that we then can reconcile it with a third party. This is something that could work, but we cannot start by this. So realistically, this year we make it easy and cheap to use payments. I know it's a very long one, and I'm following a doc that is actually pretty easy, so I apologize. But technically, As soon as it's safe, as soon as it's usable, and everybody can accept payments, then the volume kicks in. Then we convince Web2 with a clear barrier to entry that nobody is trying to solve, because people are way more interested to centralize payments. So we're seeing the Privy of the world, or the Web3 auth, their goal, or even the Coinbase wallet, they're just trying to centralize as much as possible, keep the balance. Sometimes they create their own chain, and they're trying to keep the consumers captive. And actually, what they're doing with this is they're just trying to kill the plan, like the vision we all had around decentralized payment, which is anybody could pay anyone, and nobody could control. It should be positionless, and I can pay anyone I want, and I should not rely on a regulated third party to do so. And that's technically what we're trying to achieve. We start by making it easy. We have people already using it. They use us because we're a better alternative. I can give you a story, for example, on iGaming. iGaming is gambling. That's not actually one of the market we're going explicitly after, or actually, it's a market that needs crypto today. Today, it's legal. Like, these companies are licensed and they are accepting crypto. However, it's very high regret. So it means anyone that gambled money, gambled $1,000, lost it, sometime will go for a chargeback to its bank because he wants to get his money back, and actually it's another gamble. So one of the reasons these markets are underserved is because there's a very high chargeback rate, because of very high regret of the market. And for these reasons, the gateways don't accept credit cards for these industries. However, the gateways are very careful about how they are treating their relationship with Visa and MasterCard. And if the gateways start to accept crypto for a fraction of the cost, with no chargeback, and have these high regret industries that actually are able to get, oh, it was hard to get credit card, but now that it's crypto, it's 20 bips, maybe 30 bips, or maybe sometimes just 10 cents in transaction. It actually will create unfair competition to Visa and MasterCard. So we're seeing kind of a very political blockers, where all these industries are barred away from gateways because these gateways are protecting their relationship with Visa and MasterCard. And for example, the only crypto-only gateways that has been very successful is Mesh, and Mesh does not touch fiat. They do sometimes like off-ramp, on-ramp, but they actually do not touch credit card. And by doing this, they are protecting themselves from this lobby of MasterCard and Visa that are preventing gateways to serve crypto. So we believe that Request Network, by going through the smart contracts, you actually don't need to hold a license to move the funds, because our smart contract sends the event and remits the fund automatically to you. Request Finance Network is not part of it. And in that sense, it means that anyone can self-acquire. We're just sending the right call data, the right messaging. We solve the security and usability aspect, and the rest should follow. And so what does it mean into the problem that we're solving this year? So we're solving abstraction. We want people to be able to collect crypto payments with absolutely no Web3 knowledge. They just need to decide one chain, one wallet. They don't even need to know which chain, just sign up with a wallet. They just need to know how the wallet functions, and we would actually handle the rest. We also want to remove the need for these consumers to know where the consumers are. For example, today our cross-chain, you actually need to know on which chain is your consumer, so actually you need to orchestrate to route the payment properly. We want to abstract that entirely. We want people, a merchant, to just say, or someone says, I want to be paid on days in USDC, and the rest is done by Request Network. Usability, we want paying and accepting crypto feels like a fiat payment. Today, it shouldn't be a website centralized, like a unique website executing call data in their own way, and you having to review yourself a transaction. We want to make it easy for a payer to review a transaction, to approve, and to see where it's like how it's going, and to make it feel like a credit card payment before Apple Pay, technically. And accepting payment should be the same. You just should say, okay, I want to be paid there. You tell us, and the rest should follow. And as soon as you get paid, you get notified. We also want to solve the fungibility of money. So that's what I explained. We want to make sure that a recipient can refuse money that he is not sure he can redeem for fiat or resell, or send again. What we're seeing today is decentralized payment is only used between people that know each other. We see in Brazil, Request Finance is a great example, is you pay your employees, you get paid by your clients, and you pay your suppliers. It's a closed loop. There's no one to say, hey, I'm accepting money from a totally unknown source that is maybe linked to a North Korean hack or something. Nobody actually is taking this risk. If we don't solve the fungibility of crypto, we believe that it cannot be kept. And finally, security. We want people to pay through a smart contract with the same risk as a wallet-to-wallet payment. You just take the risk of the wallet amount, or it should be even fiat. You take the risk of the payment amount, but not the content of your wallet. And today, with the Bybit hack and the new way people are actually trying to hijack cold data, we feel that it's our mission to make it safe to pay. We cannot afford to have builders take the risk having to protect their front end like if it was a PSP or like a payment provider in order to just process pay. So these are just, as an example, some of the problems that we're trying to solve and that we'll be solving this year. So overall, we were a protocol for accounting apps, mainly because the first accounting app of Request Finance actually gained notoriety in order to make payments, but it's very hard to achieve with the SDK. We made it easy to use the SDK via the API. We figured out that no one is actually ready to copy Request Finance, but the market was already saturated. They did too good of a job. And we figured out that invoicing is not a buoyant market. The real market is payment. And then if we need to use invoicing after the fact to document to allow redeemability, for example, you collect payment, you want to redeem it for fiat, we need to prove that you actually how you made this money to prevent money laundering. That's where our invoicing will be used. And in terms of market sizing that I wanted to share is, if you're like the stablecoin market in 2024, so it's a while back, was 27 trillion. If you're just capturing 5% of this market at 5 bips, we're talking about an overall market of 50 million USD per year. And this was 2024 data. But if I'm going with invoicing is so much smaller. There's only 138 million stablecoin transaction per year in 2024 with the same amount, 26 trillion. If we get 20% of the market versus 5% with those 10 cents that we were actually charging, the overall market, the max is actually 2.7 million USD. So we're talking about we're moving from 2.7 to 50 million by actually going to the 5 basis points. And that's also the reason why we changed the pricing in 2025 is we were scaring new projects because 10 cents is actually very expensive for cheap payments. Because for payments under $10, it's actually more than 1%. And people were actually usually afraid, or at least saying, oh yeah, I can just use you for bigger payment. But as soon as people are processing huge payment, 10 cents was not expensive enough. So that's why we wanted to make sure it was linear. And that's why we decided rather than have an invoice on request, like payment and request for creation, we wanted to have it in payment detection. It's actually a very complex thing because create a request, it's transactional. You create it, then the payment goes through. But actually charging the 5 basis points happens after the fact when the payment, like the request was created, when the payment happened, depending on which chain it is, how it's done, if it's cross chain, same chain. It's a very complex change. However, we feel that that's the right move. So overall, that's what we're doing. So we are targeting a market that is like 20 times bigger. 20, more than 20 times bigger by moving from 10 cents to the other one and 10 cents to 5 basis points. And even though we're allowing people to mark up, if we're too expensive, we'll prevent distribution. So I'll go through the question. I know they are in the questions, but overall, that's what we'll be solving. So we are really helping payments to move. Then we'll be documenting if needed, but it's not mandatory. And we make sure that we abstract all the complexity of payments and make people feel they're using Stripe without using a processor. We just make it crypto extremely easy. So now Q&A, strategy roadmap. So there's a lot of things that I covered. So Quarter-by-quarter strategy, Toby, we are starting by, we're restarting very small in usability. So really starting making sure that, so the most important part is security. So Q1 is the moment where any person processing payments on Request Network should be more safe with us than with anyone else. And as soon as we have security, that's where we'll start to cross-chain and abstraction. So see it as number one focus, security. Number two focus, usability and abstraction. Surplus value for token holder. As I mentioned, we are going for a market that's 20 times bigger, and that has no barrier to entry. The invoicing as a barrier to entry and was too expensive with the 10 cent. The 5 basis points is so cheap on a very low amount that we're actually opening up to anyone that does small businesses, like small transaction, and we can actually grow into bigger. We also didn't want to scare people with bigger transaction. That's why we introduced an experimental capping at 25, because anytime we were talking to big companies, it's like, oh yeah, but 5 bips is huge when I'm processing tens of millions of dollars per day, like in big payments. And that's where we didn't want to prevent bigger consumers to come in. However, we just multiplied by 20 the market and moving from 10 cent to 5 bips. However, the collection of it was difficult because changing, well, I'll go after the question, but changing the way we charge is a huge change. And especially as we're building an API that's a bit more centralized, we had to fight between protocol level fee versus API level fee. What differentiates the current new strategy from the one that had been employed in 2017 and 2025? I think I went through it quite well. So yeah, the market of outsourcing freelancer, we have the skill set in-house, and we figured out that no one is as good as we are to build something on our protocol. And rather than building SDK for SDK users, we actually use our top-notch engineering team to actually build easy-to-use systems using our technology. And that's why we actually increase our velocity and our ability to deploy really cool product, where before we used to do SDK for SDK, hard to test, hard to validate. What I'm the most excited for 2026 and what will create more value for the product token holder? Security. Security is something that crypto is a world where everybody is extremely smart early adopters and handle the complexity themselves, which means that they actually don't understand that nobody else can do nobody has the same patience or same ability to go deep into a subject than any crypto enthusiast. And so security, the fact of me paying on the page, I can recognize request find on this network and be sure that the money goes to my recipient and be sure that I don't get stolen the content of my wallet. I think for me is the biggest innovation that we had in crypto for a very long time, and for this in decentralized. Question from Martin: what are the main competitors in payment? Isn't Alchemy Pay going to the small market? No, I think for us, the main competitor is Mesh. They raised 75 million at a valuation of 1 billion this month. They're doing something that we do, but we do it bad. We have a better technology. They do end front end in order to orchestrate same chain payments to allow anyone to pay from decentralized wallet, centralized wallet. When I use centralized Coinbase wallet, Kraken wallet, they do something really well with exchanges. But they do same chain, and they do have something called FlexPay, where you actually can give them 5 addresses and they will just decide which address to display. And they track the payment through the front end because they own the front end. We have our smart contract. So the only reason, for now, if it's unsafe, it's not as strong, but it means that we can do same chain payment, we can do cross chain payment, we can do subscription payment, because we can know which payment is which one, and we don't need to connect it to the front end. I believe that, yeah. So if I were to compare, that will be the main competitor. That will be the best one. Alchemy Pay, all the one that are connecting, I see that they are way more closer to Privy. Privy is trying to keep you captive because they own a portion of the key. They can decide where you go, and they try to take a fee for anything that goes out or in Privy and try to keep you into your own ecosystem. We will be working with Privy. You come with Privy, you pay with Request Network, sorry for the lingo, but request network everywhere. And you actually can just pay from Privy to Web3 auth through request network. And we actually allow them to exit very easily with just a click to pay link. They will always force you to pay from them. The others will pay from them and to try to keep their ecosystem. We believe that also Alchemy Pay with a smart account, they're trying to keep the smart account captive, and any inflow in, inflow out, and everybody's trying to kind of take a piece of the cake. We don't want that. We want everybody to be able to transact freely everywhere and for cheap, and with just a click to pay and safely without relying on this ecosystem, like on this blocking ecosystems. 2025 was a very bad year for our request network in terms of adoption. What went wrong in 2025? One of the other shifts in strategy you mentioned time and time again. No, I think it's, as I said, we were aiming request finance market because that was the biggest one. It was growing. It stopped growing as we expected. Like we expected this to grow bigger in 2025. We saw that actually was meant to link to foundation money drying out and being a bit more scary because they were seeing a crypto winter coming. And we figured out that there was a finite market, a finite amount that was raised to ICO that was being dispersed, and we don't want that. What is sales and marketing strategy for 2026? Are the sales guys getting meetings? Are you waiting for the new change to take place first? This already has started in January. Quentin is, if you want to speak up, but he's already traveling everywhere to talk to all of the underserved market. That is iGaming, gaming, any kind of industry, or even Latin region, Southeast Asia, trying to make sure that we make the word out that you can transact without needing a PSP and you can accept payments yourself. And so if you feel underserved because you're too small to convince, you actually need to use this. Secondly, marketing. I don't know if Kai or Alex want to speak up, but I know it's pretty hard to have many people there. But yes, the website, there's a new website on the way, entirely new image, new brand archetype. That are about to be released in 2 to 3 weeks max, but technically expect the entire company, like the way Request Network is represented online will entirely change in 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. We already seen the markups. We are allowing you to accept payments, we're allowing you to manage your funds safely, and we stop talking like there's like black and green image of more like a not obscure like crypto project. We are solving real problems. We are allowing people to transact safely, and we are making sure that our image changed. Kai, Alexi, Quentin, you want to add something? Feel free to jump in. I think you can, but let me know. I'm in Slack if you want to say that. But anyway, we can move on. But feel free to jump in if you want to add. Right token, like, I don't know the price point. What I know is we don't want to create fake value. We don't want to create fake announcements. We want to create very deep value. For us, deep value will come from adoption. Not adoption in terms of revenue, but adoption in terms of people that need us to transact and that need our knowledge to move money very easily. We see like with Econ, PG that are working on project, and we can see that we are doing something that people don't do. We are making it easy for people to build products on our protocol. Now we need to make sure that this goes up in terms of usage. And the price for me is today, and that's a personal take, has a long way to go. We just don't want to end up in following a market and then collapse. We just want to make sure that we do things right, we put the right effort, the right place, marketing, sales, engineering, product, and we build long-term value. The rest, the token value will come from growth, will come from usage, will come from burn because we just multiply by 20 the market, will come from other dynamics that we could introduce, and I'll not like comment here, but there's many things we can discuss around like potential staking to make sure you have access to the protocol or have availability. We can go really far. The thing is, this is not a question for now. It's a question for when we have people relying on us for real business. How is there zero API if you collected? Fair question. We have we have requests created, so people that are hoping to get a payment going in, and the tracking of the payment against certain of these requests has been very low. And mainly because either you're the foundation, you pay with your methodology, but if you ask someone else to pay, so our previous market for, you don't have people pay you, or we actually only have success in people accepting money. So the market that we're going for 2026, which is accepting, that's the main success we had last year, which is people using for payment because we're solving a real problem. But for disbursement, people sometimes we buy exchange, they have alternatives. Sometimes they just use us to persist a request because they want to store a record and not having to store themselves. Or sometimes they just want to use us to read payment requests overall. But so far, we are as disappointed as you are, and that's why we're pivoting. Why wasn't the Bird incorporated into contract level in SDK? People don't use the SDK mostly because except Request Finance that has built the knowledge over the years to do it. So if we actually incorporate it, means that we need to incorporate the burn and all the smart contracts that rolled out on the 25 chains, which is an incredible amount of work to collect at the SDK level, where we actually could do it on the API level relatively easily. Also, Request Finance, we could decide that we want to charge them. However, we know that we now are adding value, we're adding security, we're adding cross-chain, and we believe that they will move away at one point from the SDK to the API because they're investing a lot of energy running the SDK themselves. And we believe that all of this tech debt of transitioning to the protocol fee on the protocol, on the SDK level, knowing that there's a high chance that Request Finance comes to the API because we're doing a really good job there, means that we'll be wasting time. At one point, if we have great adoption and we're seeing people wanting to bypass our API because the costs have become prohibitive and they're trying to go for cheaper, that would be great. We'll actually incorporate the 5 pips. There's potentially the ability to upsell as well the API for security, for cross-chain, for any kind of additional feature that we provide. We don't want to do it, but there's many services that the protocol can do to make it usable. So far, SDK level, it's indexing messages, and this doesn't have a price point bigger than 5 pips. Is there a need for a request token? I guess to expand on the point a bit more, the token is marketed as not to spam, but Request Finance have been able to use the network for the past few months with no issue and no token burn. So then, why is there a request token? So actually, this one is not done. We want people to not spam us with IPFS requests persisted on chain, and if they are free, people could just dump a huge amount of requests to be persisted. And this is not done. It's not mandatory, and Request Finance didn't need persistence because they are storing it locally as well, and as well they were persisting encrypted. So they decided, so it actually was a bottleneck. That's where we learned it was a bottleneck is putting on the blockchain means you need to have it persisted and get the feedback that was there in order for the next workflow to start, where a payment should be instant. And so both got correlated. So you can actually create an in-memory request with an ID. You can store it after the fact on the blockchain, but it should not block you in your process. And so Request Finance does not persist, even though they're using us for payment detection. And so that's why we believe that they need us, they still need us, and they cannot not use us for payment detection. It's just, it was built with the pricing made on request creation and not on payment detection. And that's why we're changing, but it's really hard to implement on SDK. So we're doing an interim in the API, and we are pretty confident that they will move to the API because at one point, that's where ease of use, they will save engineering time, they will save a lot of things, and I don't think it became a competitive advantage anymore for them. I think there will be a point where the average person can use your request network to do peer-to-peer decentralized stablecoin payment. If so, how will that affect the fee? Yes. So this is actually something that we believe could be available in this quarter. A recipient can create a destination, like where I want to get paid, create a payment link, And now that we have secured payment link that we're working on, the consumer or like his payer can just click to pay, and he's aware whenever the payment goes through. The 5 basis points will be taken. We believe that the fee will be, well, the 5 basis points can be taken either bear by the sender or the recipient. However, we will be abstracting cross-chain. So the sender will have to, will cover the cross-chain because he has, so the recipient doesn't know where the sender has his funds. Either he has the same chain, it's cheap, he'll be prompted that it could be same chain, but if it's cross-chain, he will have to cover the cross-chain fees. So yes, the average person will be able to use Request Network to peer-to-peer, way safer than a wallet transaction. Will be able to check if it was done, where it is, and potentially even see the history of his payment. Fee, API usage, and product market fit. Oh, I think this was already answered. The API is not being used at all, which means the alternative usage of request build infrastructure seems sufficient for customers. How do you plan to address it? That's exactly what we believed last year. So this question, Martin, is end of 2024, early 2025. Let's make an API because it needs to be easy, but we're struggling to have more than request finance integrating. And we have people integrating, but they have no value. Like they have no volume. It's not their fault. It's just it's a saturated market. You have to convince a new foundation to change the process to disburse or to pay invoices. So you're talking to invoicing, to accounting teams, finance teams. It's a hard sell for low volume, and actually it's a dying business because the companies are more and more careful about how they disperse. Did you gain insight from the API updates? I have an impression it's also a duplication. I think I have the answer on this. Request, so Martin's question, Request Network is a foundation. You mentioned when to bring more startup spirit to it. If you understood you correctly, maybe it's a more of a culture thing. Oh, yeah. Does that include alternative strategy to finance operation? Right now, ICO funds taking revenue is used, I guess, to pay for operation. If so, the plan to generate revenue from payments. Yes, the goal is actually to be able to have the foundation running on, so burn plus potentially being able to run operations. We remain a foundation. The only thing is we were not innovating fast enough versus the market. So yes, when I mentioned startup spirit is innovation. We need to try, we need to fail quickly, we need to retry, we need to learn from our market. And we should not take the fact that we are a foundation, that we are still around, that we have a renowned technology to be cocky and to hope for people to integrate with us because we're good. We want to make sure that we solve real problem. And so our focus is to make sure that we can provide, like, run entirely decentralized. So it means, so the API will always remain as security. We didn't find a way to have an easy way to integrate safely and to pay safely without a bit of centralization. But today, the only centralization that we accept is to make it usable, easy, and safe. We're not trying to cap more value, trying to have people captive. What we want just is making sure that the initial spirit of our white paper to just unlock an limitless economy is true, but we believe that we cannot expect people to be like you guys, Web3 savvy, technical, and know how to make payments and reviewing cold data before approving. So, and right now ICO funds taking revenue is used. So today we have not been able, and I'll be entirely transparent, is with the adoption we have, it's not the volume of transaction that allow us to operate, and that's why we are now making sure we are very, very scrappy, and we have made sure that we kept all our costs extremely controlled in order to try, grow, and develop the business without acting like the other foundations that are huge, spending, organizing those big parties. We're just bringing the spirit of Chris and Etienne that slept in the same apartment, working really hard and just try to find the adoption when they were at Y Combinator. And we're just bringing back this very driven, intentional, growth oriented approach in order to give back to the community first the trust we had all these years. And now we have the technology, but now we need to make sure it's adopted. Once you get PHP usage technology ready, how does the request network plan to use marketing to get people to use or be aware of it? That's a good question. We want, our goal will be type distribution. That's one of the strategy behind the 5 basis points. Transaction in fiat in credit card is 2%. When they do crypto, they never go under 1% because they will be competing with credit card. And so they say, okay, crypto no chargeback 1%, and then fiat chargeback 2%. And actually, they just anchor the price on fiat. We are at 5 basis points because we want people to be able to make 50 bips, 55 bips if they want on this transaction, still be half the price of any crypto competition. Like PayPal is doing 0.99. Like everyone is doing this. So it means that people could still mark up 45 bips. So make it a revenue and being half of the price of the first crypto competitor. So we are a small team, and Kai is an expert in growth, but also we want to make sure that we don't solely rely on ourselves. We want people to even make a revenue stream out of payment. If someone wants to become a payment processor himself using our protocol, because it's impossible to build, and we're okay with that. And that's why we decided that we didn't want to be too big of a percentage of the market, because we wanted everyone to use us and the marketing to grow. Web2 adoption and market strategy. It seems like Web3 startups have to consolidate due to current market condition. How will you target Web2 companies? What are the most substantial differences in their need? It's very interesting. Web3 startup is a paradigm. When you're Web3, you decentralize your data, you decentralize your code and your operations. It means that technically you open source everything. It means that if someone wants to copy you, he's copying you, and he can just take your smart contract, just edit it. Everything is public. The data is public. Your consumers you can copy everything. So a startup includes fundraising, and it's actually really hard to fundraise when you don't have any consumer stickiness, because people can just, or even competitive advantage, because people can copy you. So what we've discovered is decentralization cannot be sold to anyone that needs to raise money. And we discussed with companies who were Web3 protocol, and as soon as they had a really good idea, they would actually make it proprietary, and there's a portion they will hide, and they will try to fundraise, and they actually will move away from the Web3 world, because it works as long as you don't have to raise fund. And that's why we're extremely lucky. We raised fund in 2017. We've been extremely frugal about it, thanks to Chris and Etienne. They've been rock stars in the management and making sure that we were careful, which means that we have the ability to grow without having to fundraise by making our technology proprietary. We decided we want to make it somehow proprietary because we don't want to be copied for the time being, and because we have to do it for security reason, but everything is public on our protocols. I mean, anyone could use it. And the only reason we centralize is for security and reliability and ease of use. The rest is given back. And so you cannot sell, like decentralization, like we can see startups, it's either you have done a huge ICO, like we did, and you're able to maintain your growth and you find your fit and you stay alive, or if you need to raise fund on the market, you need to go private and you hide. So there's no Web3 start, so I'm playing with words here, Martin, but what we found is decentralization is an utopia if you don't have money. And luckily we were careful, and we brought the right skill set, the right knowledge, and we actually can make a real decentralized protocol that counts, making it easy to use. But as soon as you need to raise fund, it's private and it's no more Web3, unfortunately. It just becomes licensed or using third-party custodian. But Web2 sectors would benefit exceptionally from using NORAN. What's keeping them from using it, and what do you do to target them? Yeah, so anyone that has either a gray line with the regulators. I'll give you an example. I've discovered recently about Malta's licensing in casinos. I never thought much of it, but Malta has a license that allow you to operate in every country where it's not forbidden to gamble. So it means that if there's no law in a country that says that you don't have the right to play money online, then you have the right and the license cover it. But if you want to accept money in the country and you're a Maltese company, Malta's licensed, it's impossible to reach out to a local PSP and say, hey, I want to accept credit card for something that has no law, but it's too scary. So usually PSPs are a bit scared. And so that's actually one of the markets that could benefit. P2P. P2P is something that either go to bank, open banking, and P2P in Latin America, people need to remit funds between each other. They don't have the right to change more than, I think, 200 USD from Argentinian pesos because they're trying to fight inflation, which means that any Argentinian is exposed to the Argentinian pesos that is crazy inflationary. And if they want to protect their funds, they need stable coins. However, the local regulation is trying to bar them away from that. But River Wallet is countryless, it's on chain, and you can actually remit funds between people. So that's a few examples. We don't want to make it evade at all regulation, but we believe that having the obligation to go through regulation before even moving a single dollar, knowing that it's like you can move money in crypto, and it's just that because the orchestrator allows you to do it is licensed or does not have an interest in allowing you to do it, we feel that that's how we can help the world. And which KPI do you track to measure success of execution? Execution is a bit tough. We're developing. So execution. Our goal is results. Execution for us don't mean much. So we want really growth. We want volume. We feel that payments do not make sense. Like a request is useful if it means justify what a payment was about. So we need a payment volume. So that's why we've changed our KPIs to payment volume. Before that used to be requests, create, or even transactions. The problem with transactions is that they were action on the request, which were not a meaningful indicator of growth. Could be an indicator of multiple execution or multiple changes on one request. So I would say the closest we have the closest thing we have to, I think, a proper indicator is our payment volume. If we have volume, we can monetize. Either monetize cheap or expensive or upsell. If people, for example, security is tricky, is you need to make sure that people can be safe and also process. And you still need to make an incentive to integrate directly with the SDK. So at one point, it's a thin line, but payment volume is the best indicator. And how will the community know that you succeeded in execution? That's a good question. Really, I would love to be reviewing payment volumes going through the roof. Potentially the 5 basis points collection, that means that it's people that are using the API, that are transacting and are seeing value and recurring people coming in. That would be the best thing we could do. If we do this, we are on a track for monetization. We are so much cheaper and we know our technology is more efficient. I don't see how someone would be able to compete with us. We have an ability to play the long run. Our technology is partially decentralized, I mean it's cheap to run. We know it by heart. Nobody will be able to raise money by trying to make our existing technology private because it's there. If we do payment volume and we're able to cap That's the best direction we can take. And finally, product feature for PG. Triple entry accounting means that everybody needs to use this. So triple entries mean that it's entry in your sender, the payer, the recipient, and the auditor. Or at least it's you can see it everywhere. For this to be meaningful, it means that it needs to be everywhere. So it means you need to have people that have like top tier level accounting standards. Maybe we could do it if we're really connecting all the flows with Xero or the accounting systems, SAP, and we can actually capture a big portion of the transactions. And then maybe we actually would be able to make it work. Because what we know, like, and I've worked a lot with auditors, they usually never audit more than maybe like 50 samples or 100 samples. So it means that they actually don't audit anything. So it means that if request network could be used for even like 5% of all the transaction will be way above, as long as it's like a random like amount of transaction, will be way above anything that an auditor could audit manually. So I would say let's focus on adopting. If people are paying, that means that we can actually then talk to the accounting system. And north of 1% of usage in the transaction will be more than what any human auditors can audit. And I think if we do this, we can just, I think we just disrupt the auditors sector. They will still do advisory, but that's how we, yeah. So triple entry accounting, that's exactly the thing is, it will come later. If we do it too early, we lose our audience. And first, and top of it, we force them to be accountingly correct. Oh, there's a lot to, okay. So I'm still, sorry, I was speaking a lot, but yeah. Yes, everybody works for RN is at RN, and there's no RF crossovers. Technically, there's only HR that could be helped sometimes, advisory, but it's like it's not hired by one by the other. It's just because initially there was just a link where we could just like have certain hours here and there, just as part time, but that's it. So no one is working for RF and no one RF is working for N. It's really, there's a huge separation. What's the relationship between request network and request finance? Still need cooperation, so the contact synergy between the team is request network success still important to request finance and vice versa. It seems they're both so completely separate now, and not only because of the fee debacle. They raise money, and they have investors, and you are our investors. So we have like we don't have the same interests. I would say we are getting along really well. They need request network because without us, they are nothing. That's what they use. However, they're running a little bit more on the SDK, so they're running on the decentralization and all the features that David and the engineering team are building will benefit them in the end. So see it as a very good relationship. They are like it's a spin-off, but they are also a great way for us to understand where we do well and where we can improve. So see it as the way we can work together. And like we work together very distantly, we catch up and we are trying to tackle the market. Both companies are so convinced that decentralized payment is the future and we need to make it work. And so we're very focused on making this, like we need to succeed in our own missions and we are not overlapping. And community engagement. Alexi, ping me if you want me to do it, or like I'm happy to. But what's the vision for the community? Any plans for Discord, for instance? There has been long years of downward trend in activity, engagement, trust, and optimism. Oh, there's Sky coming in. Okay.
Yes. I'm trying to show my camera. 1 second. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks for joining and for you.
No worries.
We just don't see that. It's loading.
There we go. Great. Thank you for the question. And so I think Tristan has okay.
Wait, I cannot hear you correctly. I don't know if it's only me. It's guys, do you hear Kai correctly? Or it was only me, it was just blocking. Try again, Kai?
So Tristan has covered a lot of it. And so over the years, there's been an organic kind of tapering of decentralized builders on the community. And so that has also impacted the engagement that we are driving on this community. Now what we're seeing is that there's a strong focus on the token and the investment of the token. And so hence the reduction of the engagement that we are driving. We cherish the community and the engagement with the community. We would like to drive engagement, and I asked a couple what you would be most interested in seeing on this community, and that's something that we would love to keep hearing from you guys. What we don't want to do, we're in a little bit for a while, is just posting for the sake of posting something. And I think that's not the best kind of engagement that comes out of that. And so, yeah, this AMA is partly because you also requested it a couple of months ago, and that's something we will keep driving for.
Thanks, Kai. And then, so the connection was slightly bad, but yeah, overall, the community, as we have less builders, and the community is made for builders to build, and we're centralizing a bit because we kind of, after a few years, we felt that, okay, there's no, like, without incentive, people are not integrating. And so there's a bit of centralization, so there's a bit less of a need of PRs and technical requirements. We still have, and we welcome them a lot. But there's a portion of our technology that is, like the safety, reliability, and usability is centralized. So it's something that we can a bit rely less on. However, this community is important. We actually are, like, you're very important to us. Sometimes it's tricky because if you sometimes want answers on the token, and we cannot really answer on the token. We're thinking the long run, and the token is such a short run. We want this to work, and we want we want to give it back to you. It's just that if we focus on short-term optics, we're killing the company. And you can see it with when investors just think about, yeah, you're right. Token strategy is not short-term, but it's like, when will it pump? I think that's the main question. So I would say the community remains. We'll continue having you. We also want to get also the ideas. We want the project to come, project to come from the community. Also, we want your help to convey our launches, our new things, the new things we launch. And we'll try to not post for posting. We'll try to have the organized, refined, and content-heavy posts. Potentially a bit less of the what we call degen. And again, I'm a bit of a Web 2 guy. I'm doing my best to be a bit more degen, but Joe, I have to learn a bit the sense of humor there. But anyway, so we will. Just one thing I wanted to call out is, I know sometimes it's just for fun, but actually the team can be impacted sometimes by the negative comments. We're working really hard. I think it's not like our goal is to succeed. It's just not to be busy. But just always keep in mind that we're not a faceless, even though we are a protocol and we're doing our best, we're not faceless. And we're really working hard to make it work. Thanks, David, as well, for being such a good presence on the protocol and on Discord to help. But again, guys, thanks for the self moderation, and yeah, David's a rock star. And thanks for the self moderation. And again, just remember, like, we are hardworking guys, really trying to make it work. And we also work for we at the end work for your recognition, to also value your trust over the years, and we know we'll make it work, and we're working hard for that. So thanks for the good questions, and overall, it's always very good comments. Just if you can just paste down the bad joke or silly jokes. When it's offensive, it just can impact motivation, but overall, you're a great community still. So yeah, community is there to stay. Technical. We trust less the ability to find Google technical PRs and technical builders on the SDK level in the community. and we'll have to evolve a bit more into usability and the API. But it's there to stay. And as well, we replaced most of the team. Like we replaced both Alex left and Marina. So we have Alexi and Kai that are a bit less familiar with Discord and with these kinds of community. They're coming a bit more from the web too. So there's also a bit of a ramp up. So don't expect us to give away or give up. It's just that there's a ramp up period. And where the focus is today is on the website, the image, how we talk about the brand, how do we communicate outside. And naturally, you're there, already there, and we see a bit less of technical contribution coming in, and that's why they've been a bit less of a focus in the recent month in the community. But it won't be no new logo. Just expect a bit more white rather than we love the logo. There's still this ambiguity between request finance and request network. I'm sure you'll come next, but no, the logo remains maybe just a bit more of a whiter. See it as more like talking the language of the payment world rather than the crypto hacker black and green matrix kind of cover language. And that's everything I had for you guys. I hope that you get the answer you wanted. We've been, as you said, as you might have seen, we've been very, like, we're not hiding anything. It's just a matter of we're making sure that this works. I hope that it will drive excitement. Sorry it was end of day and struggled a bit with articulating the strategy, but I see from the question that most of it went through. So don't hesitate. And something I want to call out is feel free to ping me, and I'll be always welcoming one-on-ones with you guys. The ones I've talked to are it's always a pleasure. Super smart, knowledgeable with protocol. Remember that the team has changed since 2017 to now, so there's been a full replacement of everyone. And in some cases, you have more history than us. So if you have a question or if you want to share a point of view, take any time in my calendar, or I'm sure Kai, Quentin, or David, and just if you have any question, we are not strangers. Thanks, guys.